the morning after warmth of a hotel bed. It's a shame that goodbye is the last we're gonna say, when neither one of us wants to walk away. A thousand moons have passed me by. The thought of you by my side goes on and on. I'll never die with you, with you. You said, don't worry, we're always gonna be everlasting in the hour when the whole world stands still. A thousand moons have passed me by. The thought of you by my side goes on and on. I'll never die with you, with you. A million tears could fall from eyes. The sky could fall, the sun could cease to shine. No, I'll never die with you, with you. Ooh, 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 ooh. I'll never die with you. Ooh, 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 never. A thousand moons have passed me by. The thought of you by my side goes on and on. I'll never die with you, with you. A million tears could fall from eyes. The sky could fall, the sun could cease to shine. No, I'll never die with you, with you, with you. I'll never die with you. I'll never die with you. I'll never die with you. I'll never.
gotta make my shit long, you know, because I got my resume is like.
I mean, I want to give a little. I try to give a little bit of context. Give people. I mean, you guys all.
Just be like, here's a black woman. That's really all they need to know.
I think some context is good, but. All right, welcome to Keep Your Mind in Tune. We have an amazing panel of musicians this week. I'm just blown away by the amount of talent here. Joining us once again is Nikki Glaspie.
What's up, y'all? How you feeling today?
Again, we mentioned in the first episode, Nikki toured with Beyonce for 5 years, Dumpsta Funk. Did I read that you played with Shaka Khan?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the Nth Power, Nikki's own band, really amazing. And your guys' last release was it the Bob Marley?
Yes, it was.
2018. It was called Rebel Music, a tribute to the music and message of Bob Marley, and it's incredible. I recommend everybody check it out. We've also got Karl Denson joining us. Welcome, Karl.
Hey.
Yay!
Karl, of course, of Karl Denson's Tiny Universe, and your most recent release was Gnomes and Badgers. Is that correct?
Yep.
I really love that album, man. That's incredible. And Karl has also played with Lenny Kravitz, Grey Boy All-Stars, I think I read Steve Winwood, Slightly Stupid, and most recently, Not the Worst Gig in the World, the Rolling Stones. Thank you so much, Karl, for joining us here. Very excited to have you.
My pleasure.
And we have Sylvester Onyejiaka, who is going by Sly Fifth Ave in his solo project these days, which is really incredible. I've actually spent all morning listening to the new album, which is called What It Is. Anyone who has not checked it out should actually check it out.
Go pick that up now.
I'm doing it right now.
And also in another one of my favorite bands, Ghost Note. Also, Sly, I knew that you played with Prince, but I read today Stevie Wonder, Gladys Knight, Dave Brubeck, Taylor Swift, and Janelle Monáe. Is that? I was just a little bit surprised. That's
the only time in the history of pop music that Barry Sachs was ever a solo.
Amazing. We got the whole gamut covered right here.
Yeah.
We got rock and roll, we got funk. There you go.
Yeah. And I'm from Turquoise. That's it. Working my way up here. No, thank you guys so much for joining us. And we're going to speak with a couple people today. One of them is a former police officer from LAPD. Another one is a representative from a Black Lives Matter chapter in Denver. And, you know, we're going to dive into some complex and difficult issues and try to get some good factual information out there and solutions. And, you know, I know a lot of it is about voting. So just right at the top of the episode here, we want to remind people that on November 3rd, you know, on a local level, you have a lot of people to vote for that affect the way your community works and is funded. And there's also elections besides just the presidential election. There's so everyone should keep an eye on that at all times, because I think that's related to everything we're going to talk about. And you guys,
Please do your research. Research who these people are.
and you guys feeling optimistic in terms of the communities you live in and seeing enthusiasm this time around for people coming out to vote?
I see ripples of it. Yeah, but you never know. I guess we're not like in person as much. So like conversations with people and social media, but that only tells you so much. You know, it seems that the trend is going that way. I hope it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very proud to live in a place that has about the highest percentage of registered voters. It's like 98% here. So
Austin.
yeah. I'm very excited for what's to come. You know, I think that a lot of people are realizing that they have a chance to actually make a difference. You know, but it takes all of us. It takes all of us. So we got to make sure to get our families and our friends involved. Even if they think it doesn't mean anything, it definitely does. So.
Well, I'm terrified. I am absolutely terrified because people are stupid and crazy right now. And I don't have any freaking trust in their asses at all. So everybody needs to get out there and vote and do the right thing and stop listening to all this nonsense and believe in all this bullshit, because it's gotten crazy. I mean, we really are living in a like a really fragile time right now. And if people need to start talking to their relatives and all their crazy ass uncles and aunts, and like, we need to turn the tide of this false narrative that's going on right now. It's getting out of control. And I watched The Social Dilemma the other day, and that was even more terrifying, because you realize that the whole AI thing is working against us, and we're just we got to get back to believing in like 2 and 2 equals 4, and it can't ever equal 5. So I'm anxious to get this clown out of office, but I'm also anxious to turn the tide on the stupidity that's taken over the country, and we're starting to export it, to other countries, and it's just we're depending on, as a Black person, I feel like I'm an American, and I'm depending on my fellow Americans to do the right thing, and my trust in them is shaken right now.
And the poll numbers we found out in 2016 should not instill too much confidence. I would say, don't get comfortable. Don't assume anything. We've seen crazier things happen before. More things are going to happen right up until Election Day. Be prepared for anything, and make sure you remain militant about getting out and voting. Vote early if you can.
Vote early.
Yeah, vote early.
Early. That's definitely the way to go.
Yes.
And if you vote by mail-in, make sure that you follow all the guidelines, read really carefully, because 1 in 5 of those are thrown out. And if you feel safe otherwise, show up on Election Day and don't let anyone tell you're not supposed to vote there or anything like that. They're threatening to have people out doing that and intimidating people, and everyone's got the right to do it. So get out and vote.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's jump on into our first guest here. All right, so we are here with Officer Keith Linton, who is the founder of Boys to Gentlemen in the community of Watts, LA originally, but has now expanded to many, many schools. What did we say, about 26 schools, Officer?
Yeah, as of last year and the beginning of this year, about 26, 27 schools.
And you're a former officer of the LAPD. And I kind of just wanted to start by asking you how that came about. I know you grew up in New York, so I just wanted to ask how you ended up in the LAPD.
Well, I guess it's a funny story. I used to work for a school district, and I had a buddy who wanted to be a police officer. And at the time, he wanted me to go to the academy to take the test with him. And I was very strong in saying, I hate law enforcement. I'm not effing with the cops. I'm not going to take any test. And he forced me to go take the test with him. And so we get to the academy, and all I'm thinking about is, really, to be honest, is Rodney King and racism. And I get to the academy and I see Black, Mexican, I see detectives, I see Metro, I see SWAT, I see all different facets of LAPD that I didn't know. All I knew was patrol, white officers with a baton. And so slowly I took the test. He took the test. Got into the backgrounds. My background took 2 years because I had poor credit. I had a misdemeanor warrant for a traffic ticket. Basically, I was that young man living in an underserved community trying to make it. And at the time, they had Bill Bratton, who used to be the police chief of New York. And his directive was to hire as many people as we could and to diversify LAPD a little bit more. So my background took 2 years. The friend who was taking it, he failed the background. I wound up going farther, so I made it into the academy. And I think when I started, I applied in 2002. And when I applied, I was like, maybe this would be, we all talk about protesting, but I thought maybe this could be my silent protest. Maybe I can get in to the system and have them see a young Black man that was raised all over, but in the projects, who has tattoos. Maybe I can show these officers that I too can read a street sign, that I know how to work a computer, that I'm literate, that I know how to de-escalate situations, that I can apply the law fairly. And maybe if I get in and I'm an officer, and these other officers that maybe have biases, maybe if they're in the car with me, maybe the next time they pull over a young brother that looks like me, maybe have some swag, maybe got some earrings, some tattoos, maybe they'll think about, hey, we got a Black dude that comes to our roll call. He's been promoted 3 or 4 times, and all young Black males are not on parole. All young black males are not on probation. All black males that got tattoos are not bad dudes. Some black men that maybe sag their pants just a little bit because they got a little swag and style, maybe they're not all thugs, because we work with one that when he comes in the roll call, we have to ask him, are you one of us? Because is he working undercover? So maybe, because we're in the car, I was thinking, well, maybe if they're in the car with me, the next time I'm not at work and they get out of the car, maybe they'll look at that young black man and think, wait a minute, okay, we working with Officer Linton. Let's give this brother a chance. And if they give a brother a chance, that could be, I'm sorry to say, but that could be life or death situation. Because I learned as an officer that, you know, I get this from my sons because they watch Avengers and Spider-Man and all that. And I think one of the things it says is with power comes great responsibility. That's like from, my sons teach me, it's from Avengers. And it's so true with officers. And I don't think they understand that, like, and I understood that because of where I grew up. So if I pulled you over and you didn't have a license, I knew I had the power to explain to you why I pulled you over, but to also save your life. Because here in Watts, if I pull you over in Jordan Downs and you have to go get your car out the pound by Nickerson Gardens or Bloods, and you here and you live in Jordan Downs, you might not even be a Grape Street, but because you live in Jordan Downs, they may say, oh, you're affiliated with Grape. So as an officer, what if I take your car and I know that the politics, so now I know you're dealing with your wife or your girlfriend or your baby moms, and a job that in underserved communities, I'm sorry, sometimes the jobs that we have don't pay sick time. So now you gotta take the bus to work and maybe see another gang member? No. Are you gonna go get your car in another gang neighborhood? No. So what happens to that car? Either you lose it or you wind up getting all these fees. And if I know you live in the housing developments and rent's like $200 or $300, I should know that you're not gonna be able to, if you choose between paying rent, buying groceries, or getting your car, you can't do all three. So in a way, even though it's his fault, I have the power to kind of save his life because I know it's tough times. So if I give him that ticket and impound his car, that's probably going to turn into maybe a warrant, maybe more money for him. So what I used to do is LAPD, you can have spirit of the law, where I'm explaining to you guys right now what you did wrong, and then leather to where, no, Dave, you're getting this ticket, show up to court this day. And so in Watts, what I did for a couple of years is I applied spirit of the law. Now, of course, if you committed a felony, domestic violence, a big felony, one rape, dope caper, or something like that, or a stolen car and you're in it, yeah, you'd have to go to jail. But in the situation where I can explain it to you, I would do that. And I wouldn't do it with my hand on my gun. I'll pull you out the car. I wouldn't sit you on the curb. I would treat you with respect and talk to you about, hey, I wouldn't even talk about the ticket. I'll talk to you about, did you watch the Lakers game last night? And then we'll get around to the ticket and I say, hey, nice to meet you. I'm also lit. I'm gonna be in here. And then he would know, like, you know what? He could have took my car. He could have cost me higher insurance rates. My death could, my life could have been on the line because I got to go to this community. But this is an officer. He's cool. And so I did that for a couple of years. And after I did that, then I was able to walk in Jordan Downs by myself and start programming because they knew I wasn't there to just arrest people. They knew I was there to try to bridge that gap. And I was able to do that because I understood where they came from. I had cousins that were locked up. I'm black, and I was telling them, I said, before I was an officer, I was a black man. And even when I was an officer, I would remind them, like, I'm in the struggle with you too. I'm in this system. So you can see there's brothers that look like you that's willing to help and that know how to apply the law. And I'm hoping that these other officers, even from LAPD, from Chicago, they see me, maybe it can trigger in their mind, like, maybe that inherent bias I have, maybe it's not all true for all black men, all black women. So I know that's a long story, but I joined LAPD for like my silent protest. And I realized when I got in that how they applied the law what reasonable suspicion was, what probable cause was, the different units you could work. And when I got in, people thought because I'm 6'2", 250, a big dude, they thought, oh, you're gonna be SWAT? And I was like, no, I wanna work with kids. And when you working in the hardest division in LAPD, Southeast Division, which is the busiest division LAPD has, and you come in saying, hey, no, I don't want to do SWAT, I want to work with kids, they kind of like you're a little punk, like what are you talking about? And so I think I wanted to respect the officers because I didn't care what they thought. I just knew that because in New York, how officers treated me and gave me a little chance, I figured if I could do the same thing for these young brothers in their hood, instead of giving out booking numbers, what if they could see me and I could start giving them hope? So what if they could look at an officer and say, he could have given me a booking number, but damn, he came, he saw me with a red cup, he didn't arrest me, he didn't say I was loitering, he understood that in the projects it's hot, he's out here, he's protecting us, and so we want to come out, not to loiter, but because now we get to get out this hot house and we feel protected. And how about he's helping my son in school with his math, with his English, with confidence building, with investing, how to tie a tie. And so, I left LAPD in 2015. And at the time I left, I probably left around 160 grand on the table with benefits included. And I was homeless for about 3 months. But I just knew that I was always preaching about living your dream. And LAPD wasn't my dream. It was a career I had to where I knew if as long as I didn't do anything stupid, I had a career for 30 years and I had to take care of my family. But it wasn't my dream. And I felt like a hypocrite. I felt like I was talking to kids and families about living your dream and I wasn't living my dream. And my dream was always to be like a community activist, giving people their voice who were scared to voice their opinion and helping kids that were like me, who suffered from PTSD, who needed some help with their mental health, who needed to feel like because they were different, they weren't included, but they wanted to feel included. They didn't know how. That was me as a kid. I had a speech impediment because of the violence I saw growing up. I had a little bit of PTSD, everything that a kid in an underserved community goes through that we don't acknowledge. We acknowledge it for our vets, but we don't acknowledge the PTSD they're going through now. Just recently seen a black man with a knee plane being put on his neck for 9 minutes. Kids were watching that. And kids are thinking, is it bad? Is it good? I don't know. This dude's on, he got bailed out. So someone over there raised $1 million for him to get bailed out. And a death was televised on TV. He's out. And these black and brown boys are watching that saying, I guess my life doesn't matter because this dude committed murder all of a sudden and he's out. So, and this is what we're going through in America. A lot of kids are dealing with PTSD. And I decided, let me leave LAPD and without the politics of it all, let me just start a nonprofit and let me go into all these schools, the lowest performing, not the easiest schools, but the lowest performing schools. Instead of yelling at these kids and saying, you're suspended, you're doing this, how about we get them in a circle and do like a harm circle and get down to the level so we can understand that the reason he might be cursing you out, the reason he might be falling asleep is because maybe he didn't eat a meal last night. Maybe he slept in the tub last night because they were shooting and he didn't get any sleep. Maybe that's not in his life because of high incarceration rates where 95% of my young men, their dad's not at home. So maybe all these issues, and then maybe for him to even walk to school, sometimes he has to run to school. So now you have a kid who didn't eat, who didn't sleep, who has to run to school. And in the state of California, if you're in 3rd and 4th grade, only 25% of our black and brown boys can pass math or reading. So you have those 5 things. And then you get into a class and you expect these kids to just be okay. And if you don't know all that as a teacher, then as soon as, let's say I have a student named Dave, as soon as David is saying, you send out of class, you send him home. Where are you sending home to? You're sending him home to the hood, to the streets to recruit him. And I knew that. And so I said, no, let's keep them in school. Let me come into your classroom. Let me work with these kids. And that's how Be the G was formed. Yeah.
Man, that's really awesome and like super inspiring. We've talked a bunch before, and I'm definitely looking forward to getting involved. I have a couple of questions, but I think I'm gonna start with this one because it's a question that most African Americans have, and we always ask it to lawyers, but I feel like it's definitely a great question to ask a person that used to be a police officer. When we are in compromised situations, let's say I get pulled over, whatever, and it's actually happened to me quite a few times. But, like pulled out of the car, profiled, do you have any weapons? Like anyone who knows me knows that, like, I would never like have any weapons or be any type of threatening human being, but I have been treated that way just because of the way that I look. So, what is your advice as far as like how to handle that situation? Like lawyers always tell us, you have to know your rights and like say this and that, but from someone that is on the other side, how do you think it is best for us to like de-escalate that type of situation?
That it's tough. It's we've had our talks where we've talked in our Wednesday Zoom meeting sometime, and it really pains me, even as a former officer, to see that. What I say is, because I was pulled over the other day, and because I don't look like an officer anymore, because I have my beard and sometimes I wear my earrings, and when I don't have a long sleeve, you see all these tattoos. So even myself, a former officer, since I've been retired, I probably got pulled over about 50 times. And
that 1-5 or 5-0?
5-0.
50 in 5 years.
Yes.
Wow.
And I'm a former officer, so I have a dark tinted vehicle, and even me knowing my rights, I get a little nervous because I'm like, and I'm sorry to say, but in my mind, I'm like, I hope I'm able to get out the words that I'm a former officer, and the reason why I went over tenants because I have gear in here still, and I don't want people looking in my car before they prone me out. And I'm sorry, but as a black man, and I don't think anyone can understand, as a black man and seeing all the stuff on TV and seeing an officer say, hey, let me see your ID that says you can carry a concealed weapon, and then he gets killed in front of his baby and his mother. I can't think of the guy's name right now, but that happened a year ago, a couple years ago. So I'm always thinking that, like,
what was that?
They don't know who I am.
I'm sorry. Carl, what did you say?
No, that's Philippe Castillo.
Yes.
They got shot holding his own with his right to carry.
Right, and all he was doing was like this. I'm gonna show you my eye, and boom, and his little baby is consoling the mother, and I'm thinking they don't know I'm also Linton, so please don't let that happen to me. And that shouldn't even be in my mind. And I'm a former officer, so how much worse for Sly, for Karl, for Nikki, that you have no idea what law enforcement does. And so I always tell people, like, it's a thin line, because Nikki could be real calm and be like, yes, officer, here's my ID and this and that. But what if the other officer is just pissed off? Like I've seen on some of these news channels or I've seen it to where the guy's real calm. Like Castillo was very calm. Yes, officer, I have a concealed. Let me see your ID. Okay, boom. What did he do wrong? He wasn't belligerent, and the officer was like this, and so he had a baby, and the wife was next to him. So it's like, I could tell you.
Let me sneak in here. So a lot of this just have you seen up close that kind of irrational fear from a white officer towards people of color?
That's a good question. When I worked at Southeast Division and I did traffic stops, and I had a white officer? No, I did not. I did not. But what I did see is when we got to the car, and I would ask the person, and my gun would be out, and I would ask a person for the license registration, I could see that they were nervous because as an officer, I would look right here and I would see this going all over the place. And then to me, like, you're guilty. It meant to me, like, let me calm you down because I get it. I understand. You don't know what's going on. And so I see some officers might look at that and see this popping out and say, oh, he's guilty, something going on. And they heightened it and they escalated to like, get out the car. And I would say, brother, this is cool. Yo, do you have your license and registration? Don't worry about it. You cool. Let me just, you ran that light. Why'd you run the light? Let me just talk to you. Because I would think, I got a partner. I got a walkie-talkie to where I can call it airship. I don't need to escalate the situation. I'm under control. I got all the training in the world.
The training probably is some element of it, right? I mean, officers who are that reactionary might be either just ill-fit their personality to be a uniformed officer from the beginning, and furthermore may not have been properly trained or just not taken in the training. It sounds like you were very fortunate to be, in a tight-knit group of officers who you helped to educate. But we see so many examples of what Karl was asking about.
Yeah, and you know what? And not to cut you off there, but you know what? Like LAPD, the division of who I was and where I grew up, and my mother and my father, and the common sense. I think people forget. Sometimes common sense is better than a bachelor's or doctorates. Common sense, and then just inherently how I was raised to treat people with respect. And I think that, like in Kentucky and all these other cities, I can't speak on their training because I see shootings that, as a former officer, I just don't understand. But I think, we talked about, I think Trump was saying that it's racist to have cultural diversity training. And I think, for me, I don't need cultural diversity training, but I think in law enforcement, there needs to be some cultural training so that they understand not just my culture, but maybe the Hispanic culture, the Indian culture, the Asian culture. It only makes sense. You can't just understand your culture and apply the law based on your culture, because then, I'm always going to be guilty. I'm always going to be up to the wrong thing. It only makes sense that not just have cultural diversity for Black and brown, but all ethnicities that you're going to serve. It only makes you a better officer. And I think when they talk about defunding, that doesn't make sense to me, but you can reallocate a lot of money to do these kind of trainings. You can reallocate a lot of money to do maybe the first ever citizen police officer academy together so we can start understanding each other. You can do a lot of stuff with allocating money that might be better than defunding some police. Now, some of the police departments that they're just off the chain, then maybe they need to be breaking up. But I'm not cool with the idea of dismantling police departments because, listen, I have family that still live in the housing developments, and they do not want to see police defunded. They want to see more police on these streets because it's off the chain right now. But they want to see good officers.
Now, when you said that you felt like the your training was really good. In terms of numbers, does LA do they have less of these senseless shootings than other places?
You know what? I think in the last couple of years, and now I don't know the inside because I've been out of law enforcement for 5 years. But when I was an officer, we had a couple of police shootings. But we didn't have, because is in the area that I worked at in LA, the police shootings are going to happen because you're dealing with a lot. You're dealing with a lot of citizens. But yeah, I don't know the numbers, but yeah, I'm pretty sure that they had a lot of police shootings. And what law enforcement does around the world is sometimes before it can make the media, let's settle. Let's pay them all this money so that we don't have to go to court. And if we don't go to court, then there's no cameras. They're not talking about what happened. If you just say, hey, Karl, yo, we kind of messed up. This officer's gonna get some training. Here's a couple million. And Karl says, okay, then the case closed, right? And I think even it's sad because even with Breonna Taylor, I get it. You know, they got 12 mil, but that's not justice. You know, and I know that, especially during the pandemic, we're not millionaires. So someone throws millions of dollars, we might take it, but in the future, we're gonna have to start saying, and excuse my language, fuck your money. Let's go to court. He needs to, you know, you give me $12 million and then he's getting bailed out the next day, and I can't kiss my daughter on the cheek, and she didn't do anything wrong. No, we're not gonna be cool with getting your money now and not having and just being quiet. So get your money. How about we go to court, and then after he's convicted, and I'm coming for your money.
I was wondering, because you have, obviously, you know, all the officers have the same training, right? You all go through the same police academy, and you have the benefit, we could say, of coming from the community that you're actually policing. So, and being able to draw these connections between like as you were saying, like, oh, okay, well, you know what, he's speeding because he's going through like a neighborhood he's not supposed to be in. He's trying not to get in trouble, and just being able to put those things together and like understand what's going on. And like, you obviously like were able to influence like people directly around you, but like, I don't know, I guess in my mind, like if I see like everything that's going on, riots in the streets, I'm a police officer, I'm just like, all right, well, if I was like towing that line a little bit, I'd be like, well, maybe like I should stop, or maybe I should straighten up my act or consider it. But it seems like these things continue to persist, and I'm just wondering, I'm like, because not everybody's going to have like your point of view of having grown up in that, but like, how does it actually like, how does it change like from within the department, and then also like what needs to happen like outside of the department to actually get people to start asking themselves these kind of questions, and like, I guess, what is it called? Critical policing, like actually like thinking about what's happening instead of just blindly following orders or going through the motions of pulling people over and reaching quotas and tickets like that. Like how do you think we could possibly come to something like that?
No, that's a good question, Sly, and I think it's going to take years. I think it starts from, you know, we're talking about voting on November 3rd, and that's great. But it's more about, what about your mid-elections? What about the elections that no one talks about on TV? What about knowing what your governor's doing, so then you can go down the line and know, okay, who's under your governor? Okay, who's in your council? Okay.
Judges.
Okay, who hires the chief? Okay, what is that chief about? Is that chief about community policing? Is he about law enforcement and everyone's guilty? Oh, you don't need him. So as a people, instead of just coming out for November 3rd, go to your council members, go to see who your local chief is and say, okay, we want this chief out or we want this chief in. And then after that chief, it goes down to your deputy chiefs. Then it goes down to your captains, and then it goes down to your sergeants, your lieutenants, and then it goes down to your officers. And I think it's a long process, but I think it has to start from the top, from the police chief to the deputy chief to your lieutenant one, to your captains, to your sergeants. And these officers like myself in the street level have to see the examples from the top brass that things are changing. Because officers can change. Like, I was an officer that tried to do my best, but the best examples will come from the top. And so I think it's going to take years, brother. I think it takes years, but I think the most important thing is that we're talking about voting, which is great, but it's more than just about November the 3rd. I don't think people understand that Trump has put almost 200 judges in places. Who stands in front of those judges? And what are those judges about? Are they about law enforcement? So when they see Sly and you're standing there with just a little ounce or whatever, now you're getting 5, 10, 15 years? Or are they judges that's going to look at you and try to help you? Like, but we can vote on stuff like that. And people are thinking just November 3rd, but I think the way to change policing is reallocating. And now, instead of just, you can protest, but you also go up to your city council meetings and find out what this chief's about. Let me see his background. How is he hired? Let me go to Southeast Division. Let me see what that captain's about. Let me see what that sergeant about. We have the right to do that so that you know who your elected officials are in your county, your state, and how they see police work. I think people just think, oh, the change person, let's them fund them and let's elect Biden. No, it starts at the grassroots. And I think people forget, like, we got midterms, you got different elections that happen before November 3rd that no one takes part in. And then you have and I'm not saying LAPD, but then you might have a police chief that gets into power, and that thinks just law enforcement, just law and order, and people complain about it, and it's like, it's not fair. Do you know about him? Do you know you can go and you can Google him? How did he get elected? Get him out of office. You can do that too. So it's sometimes I think it's like a disease, and I don't know where the cure is, but they haven't even tried to develop a vaccine for it yet.
LAPD, it's worth noting that had a lot of attention drawn to it in the early 90s for violence, and so they were actually under scrutiny in a unique way that the rest of many other cities weren't. And so I was just checking on. We were asking a second ago about police shootings. There it was like 115 in 1990, and there were 26 last year. Right. So it's coming down there, but that's because of the scrutiny. And I think that scrutiny doesn't exist. It didn't exist in Minneapolis or in Ferguson or all these places where these things are happening. And so some of it is public scrutiny, because when people realize that they're being watched carefully, they change their behavior. But I think some of defund the police, and part of the reason I don't love the slogan is because I don't think it does justice. They're talking about reallocating.
Terrible slogan.
Yeah, they're talking about reallocating the funds to people who specialize. Okay, a traffic, police officer who deals with that, mental health, actual violent crimes, homelessness, domestic violence, specializing people. So I think it's a misleading name, and I've heard a lot of people make arguments for it that just is what it is. We're defunding the militaristic side of the police and reallocating the funds, but I kind of wish there was a catchier way to say that. And
agreed.
Sly, I'll just ask you how you met and got involved in Officer Linton's program.
Shoot, we were doing the Wednesday night talks with Sput, and then I had just all the crazy stuff was happening. But I don't know. I reflected on my experience, which is the opposite, growing up in the suburbs of Texas, But and kind of just thinking about like my insecurities and what held me back, like as a child, as a Black man, like trying to grow up in this country, whatever. And I don't know, I just when I got to the root of it, because I'm like sitting here in Mexico, I'm just like, well, dang, what am I gonna do? I'm like, I need to talk to these kids, and like the kids are where it's at. It's like, forget the adults. It's like you can sort out your own emotional scars, like you're grown, but like the kids, like that's the opportunity I feel like to really influence the change. And just even something as simple as like thinking like when I was a child and somebody said to me, like, I was like, I want to be president of the United States. I was 6 years old, and they're like, you can't be president, you're Black. Teacher didn't say anything. Teacher didn't step in and say, that's wrong, you can't say that. It was just, that's what it was. And, thinking about kids that got the chance to be born like with under Obama, whether or not you believe in the structure and the government and how effective the president actually is. Like, anyways, all that to say, so I decided to start working with kids on Tuesdays, and I was talking with Keith a lot about it because I knew that he had experience with that. But it was really informative, and he just kind of was. I was like, "Hey, you want to join us?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." And then we kind of became partners in this whole thing, and
you put on a virtual festival, right?
Yeah, we did like a virtual music festival just for like the kids in this school district. Yeah, Nikki, you were there.
Yep.
Karl, we got to get you on the next one, man. That'd be awesome.
All right, I'm down.
But they just did Yeah, it was cool. It was just kind of getting excited to go back to school because I mean, who wants to go to virtual school? I wouldn't want to go to virtual school. It sounds terrible.
Yeah, like we're adults and like it's like a task to like turn on the computer and be like, okay, we're gonna do this thing. So I can only imagine for kids what that's like, and a lot of them are not even paying attention because they're in their own bedrooms. Like I taught a music camp, a virtual music camp, and there was this one kid, he was laying down, and we're like, yo, you gotta get up because like we know you're in your house and we know you're in your room. Like, are you playing a video game right now? There was one kid playing a video game, like, while we're trying to teach him. And he has on the headset and everything, and we can see him with the remote. We're like, Michael, put the remote down. Like, we're trying to tell you about the scale. Like, what's happening? And yeah, that's tough. And especially when kids don't have resources.
Yeah.
These are kids with resources, and they were like just in no man's land. So having kids that like don't really have anything and they're just sitting there staring at the screen, I don't know.
I really want to get to the bottom of this, like as far as figuring out how to get everybody to vote and pay attention this next few years, because this police thing is crazy. And I tell you, the most startling thing that I realized during this Trump era is I always thought that there were more black people in this country than there are. We only represent 13%, like 14% of the population. So we are really dependent on white people figuring it out. You start looking at the policing and looking at the irrational fear that we evoke. It's kind of like Doc Rivers was saying. Like everybody's, the Republicans are giving everybody this scare tactic, like we're the ones to be scared of, but we're the ones that being killed.
Yeah.
Like we're definitely more in that, that Dave Chappelle, like, scared of the young white guy, for the real reasons, just like what's going on in Michigan right now with these freaking guys getting ready to kidnap the governor.
That is crazy.
But that said, back to the policing thing, like we just, I agree with you, Keith, on the, as far as the voting, and really, like, I'm going to take a look at who my police chief is and who the guys are under him, and, and actually start reaching out to City Hall and finding out what's being done on this level, because it really is the important part. I mean, I just want to figure out how to get this irrational fear out of everybody. So we're not, like the fact that you are worried about how fast you can let them know that you're an ex-police officer. For those of us who think sometimes, because we're fairly articulate, but that shouldn't really be the criteria. Like we shouldn't have to. You shouldn't have to prove your intelligence to be treated fairly, and that's part of what goes on too. Like I'm able to usually talk my way out of a police encounter because I'm not doing any dirt, and I'm quick on my feet with that. But that shouldn't be the criteria for somebody not getting shot.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm definitely going to take your advice on that and find out who works for me in my city and start trying to reach out, because my sister's been telling me to do that for years. So I'm gonna take you guys up on it and get involved in the local politics more.
Dude, I would say, Karl, that it's happening. I would say that the more that I speak with people, the more, more aware that people become of the situation. It's happening. My friends are researching who's in their city council.
Mm-hmm.
Like we are. we're seeing who's on the ballot, who those people are. I mean, like, I've never watched a city council meeting. I started watching city council meetings and like taking note
Right.
of who represents me in my district and how they're voting. You know, because that is extremely important.
It really
And I
is.
definitely saw something that I did not like, and I was like, okay, this is exactly what they're talking about. This is
Uh-huh.
exactly what's happening because those people represent us, the people that live in the district that you live in. Those people represent you,
Right.
and the way that they're voting is not a representation of the people that live in the district. Like they're giving, more money to the cops so that they can surveil and, have drone programs, and I'm like, honestly, it's not necessary. The neighborhood that I live in, we don't have crime. We don't have crime like that. Like, yes, it's a, there's poor people that live around here, but there's no crime.
Right.
There's not a lot, and it's like that is unnecessary. SWAT gear, more of this,
Militarization.
military gear. Like I watched them. I watched them pass a bill to give the APD about $700,000 for that. And I just couldn't believe it. I was like, okay, this is this is exactly what everyone's talking about.
Uh-huh.
So I'm taking that extremely, I'm taking it very seriously, and I'm researching who's up because the election's happening right now.
Right.
Your DA, and also district judges, the district court judges. Like
Right.
that's a big one, especially here. I mean, I live in Texas, so there's the school superintendent. That's big. you know those are the people that decide like what's happening in the schools, and we're always complaining about how our kids are not getting the education that they need or the materials that they need or what they deserve, teacher salaries, like all of those things. So as the professor said in the last episode, the first episode, he said, a democracy only works if we're involved. It doesn't work if we don't use our voices, if we don't give our opinions on what we think should happen. So it is on us. It's on us. And I believe that it obviously there's lots wrong with the system, but if we're talking about 50% of the population voting, it's like you're only going to get half of the needs met, you
Right.
know so it is on us, and I'm very excited about what's happening because we're talking about this actively every single week, and I think that because we are, more and more people are becoming aware, and more people are doing research, and more people are finding out what they can do. So it's all been terrible. There have been absolute horrible, horrific events that have happened. But unfortunately for us as humans, it always takes something extreme, for us to then take action. It's like, oh, we got to get a root canal and then we'll start flossing. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, it's completely preventative, you
Right.
know? So I, honestly, I'm like, okay, I got it now. I got it. I'm part of the guilty party. I got it now, and I'm gonna keep spreading that and speaking that and being like, all right, this is what we need to do. We have the power. We are the people. We have the power. And they try and make us feel like we don't, but we do.
Yeah.
So we need to take it and do something with it.
Well, thank you so much, Officer Linton, for joining us here. We'll throw the website up there. It's boys2gentlemen.org. That's boys, the number 2, gentlemen.org. You can learn more about that. You can donate on there. It's definitely a good cause. And
Donate, people.
Yeah.
Donate. Like you got $5, $10.
Please.
Goes a long way, for real. Yeah, man. Thank you, Officer
Thank you
Linton.
so much.
We
Thank
appreciate
you,
you.
guys. Good to see you.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you.
All right.
Good
All
one.
right.
See you later.
Thank you. All right.
The philosophy which hold one race superior and another inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned. Well, everywhere is war. Until they're no longer first class or second class citizens of any nation. Until the color of a man's skin is of no more significance than the color of his eyes. You got to say war. Until that day, dream of lasting peace, world citizenship, and the rule of international morality shall remain but a fleeting illusion to be pursued but never attained. Well, everywhere is war. It's a war. We don't need no more trouble. We don't need no more trouble, no more trouble, no more war. Yeah, what we need is love to guide and protect us all. If you're up and down from above, help the weak if you are strong. Listen, we don't need no trouble. Stop, no. What we need is love. What we need is that sweet love. We believe in the healing power of love this evening. Oh, do you believe in the healing power of love? Well, Nikki, won't you tell about it? Take it up a little higher. Do you believe in the healing power of love? Oh, yeah. Do you believe in the healing power of love? Oh. Take it up a little higher. We believe in the healing power of love, 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 power of love. Yeah. Only love.
All right, we are here with Apryl Alexander, who is a forensic psychologist, an associate professor at University of Denver, and supervises the Denver Forensic Institute for Research, Service, and Training. Welcome, Apryl. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And I understand you are also a member of Black Lives Matter Chapter 5280 out of Denver.
Yes, 5280 stands for elevation, which a lot of people don't know. We're the Mile High City, and that's 5280 feet.
Yep.
Makes a lot of sense.
We know about that.
Can you maybe just kick it off by telling us, your experience making your way over to the university, and then how in the last, period of time you got involved with Black Lives Matter as well?
Yeah, I got started off in psychology by working with survivors of interpersonal violence, so domestic violence, childhood sexual abuse. I was originally an animal and poultry science major, but happened to be volunteering at a women's shelter in Virginia. And during that first week of training, just hearing about the stats about domestic violence and interpersonal violence, working with the people in the shelters. After that semester, I said, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So switched over to psychology. And then along the way, just was curious about what happened to people in the court system, because I saw a lot of horror stories of police officers who didn't believe victims, or victims recanting their statements because they feared retribution from the justice system or the person who harmed them. So that's where I found this cool area of forensic psych, which is simply the intersection between psychology and the law and the legal system. So I was doing that work for a while. My first year of grad school down in Florida, wrote an essay. I don't know if I could ever work with sex offenders in my life. We had to talk about a population we couldn't work with. But I was working with kids at the time who had experienced sexual abuse and other forms of trauma. And some of those kids began sexually acting out. And so some light bulbs started clicking of, hey, maybe for some people, this is the pathway. So started working with offending populations, adults who offended, mentally ill offenders, and just really loved doing kind of that work in the system. My first job was at Auburn University in Alabama, working in a juvenile detention facility, which was just a great experience in working with youth who were struggling, who didn't have resources, things like comprehensive sex ed, majority Black and brown youth in these facilities. And so during kind of that time and seeing that over the years, became really interested in social justice, advocacy, public policy change. So that's where I wanted to shift my career path, and came out here to Denver with this great position at DU, working in their Master's in Forensic Psych program. I teach and train students on how to become involved in social justice and advocacy efforts. And then I also model it in the community. So, my whole career is now kind of centered on how do we get equity in our systems, whether it's the juvenile justice system, criminal justice system, or educational systems.
And so when did you join the BLM chapter?
Yeah, so I moved here to Denver, and I said I need to kind of learn about this community. So I really just went out to a bunch of different events, started learning kind of the history here in Denver, especially of our 5 Points district. I don't know if you've all been to 5 Points here in Denver, but it's it was known as the Harlem of the West, and has this rich history of all the great jazz musicians used to come through. That's where our cultural center for our Black community is. But now it's being faced with gentrification. So just learning that history, meeting people in the community, and I came across Black Lives Matter 5280 while I was at one of those community events. And I heard about the work that they were doing in the community, and I was inspired to be a part of that movement after hearing the murders of Trayvon Martin and Sandra Bland really got to me during my time in Alabama. And so that's when I joined on board. So that was about 3.5, 4 years ago now.
I just want to, one of the misconceptions I hear all the time is, people try to pin down Black Lives Matter as this one thing, or an organization, or the leader of it, said this or said that, or this is what they believe, this is where they get money, all these things. And I don't want to entertain that too much and waste too much of our time here with it, but just wanted to point out that the organization is separate from the movement in a way, Would you say that's a correct statement? Yeah, that's how I break it down for people. So when we say Black Lives Matter, anybody could be a part of that. There is this larger movement. If you believe that Black Lives Matter and that's the work that you want to engage in, you are part of Black Lives Matter as this kind of big social justice movement. Yes, there were founders who created like this global network, but even that, the chapters even operate independently. So their chapters have all kind of common guiding principles. So all of us should be centering Black women, Black femmes, Black LGBTQ, abiding by intersectionality and intergenerational kind of frameworks. So all the chapters kind of abide by those kind of guiding principles, but we all operate kind of independently. So Black Lives Matter 5280, we do a number of things. And I think in the media, they often talk about, they're just bashing police, and that's all that they do. It's all about police violence, and we just do so much more. Within our chapter, we have 3 different squads. We have a community wellness squad,
just making sure that our community is taken care of. When Black people in our community have different needs or ask, they reach out to us for that. It could be funeral expenses. It could be individuals were injured at a protest and we help them with their medical bills. Just 2 weeks ago, we know that people are being evicted because they've lost their job and they're struggling making ends meet during COVID. We helped families pay their rent and mortgage. So we're really about kind of community wellness and kind of centering what the needs of our community is. And then next we have an economic justice squad, again, just talking about issues related to gentrification. We're displacing our Black and brown communities out of the Denver metro area because it's not affordable. There was a recent article that came out, the average home is $660,000. So I can't even afford to live here. Others can't afford to live here. And so that's a big struggle we're talking about and thinking about the businesses that are moving into these gentrified areas. There was a big stink a couple of years ago of Ink Coffee. They had a sign outside. You might have heard of it on national news. It was like happily gentrifying since 2014. That's not a joke to us.
Yeah.
So, making sure that we're up there and standing up for people in that economic justice squad. Uplifting Black businesses and supporting them. We're doing a lot around marijuana reform efforts. We still have people incarcerated here in Colorado for marijuana offenses that are no longer offenses. And then there's people making millions and millions of dollars off weed, off of being drug dealers from back in the day. And only 1% of dispensary owners are Black and Latinx. So that's a problem. How can we build a pipeline, apprenticeship program, something to give back to the community that we did harm to for that same behavior? And then last is our education squad, just tackling educational inequities in our system. We know the school to prison pipeline is real, which is kind of sets up policies, procedures that push our kids out of schools, into the streets, into the criminal justice system. So you might be familiar with the Crown Act that started in California, anti-hair discrimination bill, that we had kids being kicked out of schools or being kicked off of their sports teams for having their hair in locks or braids.
Right.
And we had that here in Colorado. And so we passed the Crown Act this year as legislation, again, to end that. And so we're bringing a lot of awareness to that. The lack of Black teachers here in this area, that Denver in certain pockets, or if you go to Aurora, that a lot of people are learning about right now, Aurora is one of the most diverse areas in the country, especially their school districts. I think over 40 different languages spoken there because we have so many different refugee and immigrant populations. So how do we provide them with teachers who look like them and keep them employed? Because we know our teachers are often overtaxed and overburdened and having to leave. And so we've been doing a lot of that work on just addressing those educational inequities. We've been a part of the Counselors Not Cops movement to get school resource officers out of schools. And this year, with the big Black Lives Matter momentum, we were able to support other organizations, other community organizers to get cops out of Denver public schools. They're going to terminate their contract with school resource officers in 2021. So, when we talk about Black Lives Matter, we're talking about all of that. We're talking about addressing all the inequality and inequities in our system in so many different ways. And so a lot of our work is doing that. Like we weren't even out much at the protest this summer for a number of reasons. First, COVID's real. And we know COVID's disproportionately affecting minoritized communities. And so we have people in our chapter, people in our community who have health-related problems or would be more susceptible to catching COVID. So we couldn't be out there. So we had to be innovative in other ways that we did direct action like we've always been. And so if you couldn't protest, we had a car rally. So people who couldn't engage in protests engaged in the car rally because you're in the safety of your car. Our first stop was at the ICE detention facility, supporting some other community organizers, Latinx and Indigenous community organizers, and we showed up there with them. And then we went to the mayor's house and shouted out our demands. And so there's so many different ways besides protest, and protest is a valid way of direct action, but there's so many different ways that you can engage in direct action during this time, and we do a really good job of modeling that.
That's
That's covering a lot of ground.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say that's important for a lot of people to know. People always think when they hear Black Lives Matter, they're just like, oh, these people, they go protest and like that's all they do. It's like, no, obviously there is way more that is done that people just don't know about, you know. And I think we're in the age of like misinformation. We've spoken about that quite a bit, and we've actually had to. Dave actually wrote something. It was very eloquent and very thought out. Just debunking the you know the
Myths.
fake, the farce that is,
Yeah, and I think for people to hear all of that, it's just, it's undeniable that it's actually about making tangible change, and sort of, I think a lot of people get scared when they hear things about regulating the way things are. It's like putting a finger on the scale, tipping the scale in one direction, but obviously that's because the scale has been tipped in another direction for pretty much forever. So
yeah, exactly.
And I think that's why we had so many people invested this summer. Is I think it was a bit of COVID, that COVID disrupted all of our systems and showed how quickly things can fail. And it highlighted so many of the disparities that happen in our system. What happens when you lose your job? You can't go into your job because of pandemic. What happens when you can't get toilet paper and your basic needs? And we're fighting over that. And then people were stuck at home and they were forced to watch the George Floyd video. So they got to see another type of injustice. So I think what happened during the summer and the protest is people are like, oh my God, everything is bad. Everything can't operate. My students can't, or my kids can't get online and do schooling because we don't have broadband internet or good Wi-Fi. And now we have this police brutality in my face. And people said they had enough. And so I think this is the time that people are wanting to try something new because they realize this year everything's broken.
Yeah. It's been broken for a while, but yeah, like you said, I think that the COVID just made people stop and like slow down, because obviously I'm a female, a black female in the United States of America. I've been seeing, experiencing, knowing these problems my entire life, since I was a child, so I think that for a lot of people, which I was one of those people, I was like, well, why now? Like, why all of a sudden after this black man dies, do people care? Like, another black man died a month ago. Another one died 2 months ago. Another one died 3 years ago. Another one died 30 years ago, 300 years ago. It's like, it's the same thing over and over again. And when it like finally came to a head, I was like, well, that only took like 450 years. But I think that obviously it's a positive thing because people are more aware now.
Yeah,
but I was definitely one of those people that was like, man, please.
I said to people in the community, I said, you're late, but I'm still welcoming you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we
have to do this together. We have to do it together, and it's been a long time. But I have a question for you, just for people that are watching and people that want to get involved in social justice change. Like, I know that there's a lot of people that want to, and they just honestly don't know how to get started. Like, where do I start? It's like we keep seeing all this stuff coming at us, and it's like, well, what can I do to actually make some sort of, tangible change?
I mean, get educated. Like, what's going on in your own neighborhood, in your own city? I like what you just said a few minutes ago. When the protests in Denver started, I was listening to the news, and they were like, what? Denver's not a protest city. They're not an activist city. What is going on? Why are people doing this? And I was like, that's not true.
Yeah.
For the protest yesterday at the ICE detention facility, there was one last week on this. We are an activist city. And then they said, why are they marching for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor? That doesn't make sense. And I'm like, those aren't the only people we're marching for. Elijah McClain just died a few months ago. And then people in the community said, what? Who is that? What is that about? And then now the whole world knows Elijah McClain's name. Ellen's tweeting his name. Janelle Monáe is doing a video about him. And so I think people need to learn about what is actually going on in your community. these Black folks aren't just out here marching for no reason. Go find out why they're out there marching.
Yeah.
What is the struggle that they're talking about? Just go up to them, talk to them. Who are the important like community organizers in your community? And again, not just Black, our Indigenous, our Latinx, our queer folks. Go out there and just meet. And, you know, I had to do that myself. You just can't implant yourself and say, I'm here to change everything. I'm going to do this work. No, there's people who've been doing it before you, and not just the people in the last 5 years. I'm talking about that this year, all these books are bestsellers that have been out for 5 years. So the Me and White Supremacy, the White Fragility, Between You and Me. All of those books have been out for 5 years. Why are they bestsellers now? Because it's trendy. So that also should call you to action of what are you reading? What are you listening to? What media are you consuming? Who's in your school? Who's in your workplace? Why is it that there are no Black leaders in your workplace? So start asking those questions and pushing for that change there. It's getting to know your community and starting to question the processes that are happening around you, not at just the individual level, but the systemic level. I've seen more people showing up to city council meetings right now.
City council.
Yeah, one, it's more accessible because our city council is online right now, so that makes it a little bit more accessible. So that might have been part of it, but it's people wanting to get informed. Why is New York City spending $4 billion on policing? But the average education spent per pupil is $11,000 in the United States. $9,000 in Colorado, and so people are starting to educate themselves and see that. And say, why is that happening? So people are going to our city council meetings and saying, yeah, we need to block this policing budget. Why are we increasing chemical weapons, but not paying our teachers right now? Why is it that we're increasing overtime for police or in our policing budget, we pay for their Christmas party. So why are we paying for the Christmas party?
You pay for your Christmas party?
It's in statute to do that every year. So I learned that this year. So we're doing that, but we're cutting mental health spending. So I think people are starting to take that time to get educated, get informed. And we're going to shut down city council and talk about how do we apply pressure to these systems that are treating us unfairly.
I understand too that you've been, lately, obviously with the pandemic hitting, you've been examining the ways in which it affects, your community and in general communities of color more than it does, 3 times more? Yes. Generally. And have you done any analysis I think some of the reasons are fairly self-evident, but as to why that is, and maybe some ways to help with that, where some efforts or donations or anything could be put to try to sort of tip that back in the right direction and even things out a little bit?
Yeah, it's hard because we have to remember all of this is systemic and institutional racism. So, what happens if you pick up a research article is, oh my gosh, African American and Latinx have higher rates of this, that, and the other. So diabetes, heart disease, this, that, and the other. And people make the interpretation, oh, it's because they're unhealthy or eat bad foods or they're lazy. No, let's deconstruct that. And so people are doing a lot of research around social determinants of health. What are these underlying things that people need in order to live healthy lives? So we need access to clean air and clean water and healthy food. Well, we have food deserts in certain parts of Denver, so you don't have a Whole Foods, which is already expensive, or you just don't have access to healthy fruits and vegetables in your neighborhood. You're not going to get there. They're going to put the Krispy Kremes and the McDonald's in that neighborhood. Again, Flint, Michigan is still without clean water. What does lead do to our bodies and our system? That's generations of harm that's being done every year that Flint, Michigan goes up without clean water. What does our school systems look like? Well, again, I told you they're pushing out kids from schools. And then we're talking about medical access, during COVID and pre-COVID. We have a high Black maternal mortality rate, high Black infant mortality rate right now in the United States because we know doctors have biases. We had cases this year where a person of color was expressing symptoms of COVID and they were turned away from hospitals. Or initially they were charging people $600 for a COVID test. That's why we see these disparities. And so we had different cities, including Denver and Colorado, said, yes, we need to label racism a public health crisis. One, public health officials have been saying that for decades, like Nikki said, or centuries, however you want to frame it. So now you're just doing it. But I want more than just lip service or this to be a performative action. I want you to actually decipher why this is occurring in every aspect of our system.
And, I'll admit to being someone who always thought I was, had my head decently wrapped around some of these issues and understood the history of things. And really it was the George Floyd thing that woke me up to a new level of just how, truly messed up everything is. And to take that time and look deep back into the history and really start learning and listening, 16, 19 podcasts. I'm like, this has been out for a year. Like,
David Duvernay's 13.
Yeah, of course. And then going down that whole list of recommended things, which, I know it was kind of, everybody was sort of going that path, but it was a good way to just really start from the beginning and learn. And that was made 4 years ago or something. And all the books you mentioned 5 years ago. And I guess this could be, forgive that this is a silly question, but even like Sly, someone like yourself, do you feel like this has just been painfully obvious? And I'm asking this because I truly have never asked this before. Was all of this as painfully obvious to you? Or has there been more brought to light even for you since all of this has come about in, the last several months? I'm just curious.
I would say, I think it's been painfully obvious in terms of my relation to what I can expect from myself to happen and how I operate in the world in regards to police and experiences in school growing up or just whatever, just being a Black man in the United States. That feels obvious to me. I feel like there's a lot of aspects that I'm learning about. First of all, Instagram and writing songs is not good enough to actually make a change. So I think that Nikki, that question that you asked was actually the same thing that I was thinking. It's just that was one of the number one questions that I asked myself, I guess. It's what can I really do? Because, other than just getting out, the protest is cool. Cause at first, I'm in Mexico City, all this has been happening. And, I feel distant and separate from what's actually going on. But then I can't go to a protest. So I can't just go to a protest and then go home and feel good about it. But the questions of what can I really do? What tangible action I can see, I can put my energy in, and it's actually working towards, other than, as you said, April, I think all those methods, all the different methods are necessary, but yeah, I think it's been eye-opening in that way, just trying to explore, kind of a way to step it up a little bit.
I know that you're doing it, working with Officer Linton's program and whatnot. I know for a fact that putting that concert together for those kids that were going back to school, that makes a difference. It's especially for us being musicians and artists, we never know what people are actually getting from the music or what we're giving them.
You have to learn. You have to learn your space in the movement. Again, I don't expect everybody to be out protesting. I often tell people to answer your question again, Nikki. Find what you do well and see how you put that into the movement. Mm-hmm. So you all are artists. So art form is part of this rich history. Locally we have Brothers of Brass, this brass band, and they've supported us in so many different ways. They came out, we did a Juneteenth party. Yeah. We had free COVID testing for a couple hours, and then we're let's just celebrate Juneteenth, which was a celebration of Black freedom and liberation, and they came out. And just thinking about the importance of music in our history and in our liberation is important. There was a group, Bakers Against Racism. It was people who do baked goods, and they were selling them and giving the donations to Black Lives Matter. And they dropped off their cookies during the Juneteenth celebration. Maybe you're a graphic artist and maybe you can make art for the movie. There's just so many different ways in which you can contribute to this space, and people are listening and people are watching that, especially our youth. That there's so many different ways to get tapped in. So what are your specific talents that you can bring to the table in this movement?
That's interesting to think about.
Well, because I was going to say, you kind of answered my question, Apryl, but I was going to say someone in, Sly happens to be he was in Mexico City when the pandemic hit and has been there since. So it must be odd for you to be seeing a lot of this happening far away. But a lot of people have to be home because of COVID. A lot of people have to be home because, for a myriad of reasons, and they're kind of trapped where they are. They don't live in an area where there are as many protests or whatever it may be. And so I was going to ask, what else can you do? But that's great advice. It's just like whatever it is that you do best, you can do it for that cause, as well as donate. Obviously, those who are in a position to do so should donate, to Black Lives Matter. And so how does that work if people want to give to, can you give to a certain chapter, or can you donate nationally, or?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend to certain chapters. Like for us, some of the donations that are coming in through our Venmo or through various means, we're using that immediately. So when we do get those community asks and community needs, we can turn that around right away and help a family. And so I often tell people to, definitely donate to the specific chapters in your community, because they might need it even more urgently right now, especially like Louisville and all the stuff they're doing for Breonna Taylor. They need that support directly to the chapter. Your local bail funds, support them, because they're helping protesters. They're getting protesters access to, again, medical treatments. We had people who had their jaws broken and, bones crushed. So getting them money and getting people who were arrested money to get bailed out is just so important. So look for those kind of local spaces where you can tap in and give. We have a big unhoused community. So giving them support, food, PPE, cleaning supplies, whatever. We were able to take our tent and now go to different locations around town and do that. And that was with community funds that we were able to kind of do that and buy all the supplies we needed to help support our unhoused folks and others who just needed simple PPE.
Yeah, I've heard that it's been a real problem there in Denver for a couple years, right? I heard a terrible story about how, I don't know if it was the mayor or the governor, was bussing people out and I don't know. The same thing was happening here in Austin. Actually, they were collecting people and taking them out by the airport. It's they don't have any resources out there. Nothing. Yeah. You just drop people off in a parking lot because it's an eyesore, but it's if they're here in town, at least there's people that will give them food. There's people that will give them water. There's people that give them money, to help them out. And it's really terrible. It's so inhumane. I can't believe. I'm you guys just picked people up and took them out to a deserted parking lot.
Or we've been doing sweeps lately. So we're just getting all your stuff and collecting it for you never to have your stuff again, and putting up fences so you can't even go in this area that close to the harm reduction center, which helps people who have addiction problems. Mm-hmm. So now they can't get that treatment that they need because they can't be nearby anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
Literally trying to make it harder for people who have nothing.
They have absolutely nothing, and you make it even harder.
And it's criminalized almost. We've talked about this in some other segments. It's, and yet another thing that I just think I didn't spend enough time thinking about, growing up and into adulthood. This is not a choice that people are making. It's either an issue of substance abuse, mental illness, or
one paycheck away at COVID-19 , right?
Yeah.
That's becoming
a paycheck away from homelessness. And so
it really on the job. Anything can happen.
Medical crisis, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Do you guys, either of you guys, Sly, you have any other questions or anything?
I'm just fascinated by all the information you just shared. Thank you so much for talking with us.
Not a problem.
Yeah.
I'm just glad to talk about, this is just one chapter, and I know the other chapters are across the country are just doing so much. If we look at DC, Louisville, LA, again, they've had a big space in changing their budget. And so there's so many kind of community organizers, not just BLM, but other local folks who are doing this work and have been doing so for such a rich time. And I think now this year is the year that people are paying attention again. That we have these cycles throughout different civil rights movements. People always say the civil rights movement, and I'm like, it never really ended. It's just different and transformed because civil rights never was achieved. People are like, yeah, Martin Luther King done. No, he was killed. He was murdered, assassinated, and civil rights never came about. Yeah.
Right.
So we're just continuing that cycle again of our ancestors who've been doing it for 400 plus years.
So actually, I have a question. I know there's a Black Lives Matter like website, but is there like a database that has all of the chapters in it listed?
Yeah.
Because I know there's been confusion because there was the guy out in California that had the Black Lives Matter Foundation, and that was not part of Black Lives Matter. And it's like, again, there's all this misinformation. So could you tell us where we could find...
Yeah, if you go to the main Black Lives Matter page, it will tell you the different locations. Again, those are the ones that abide by like the guiding principles that have been centered for the movement. I keep repeating that because, this summer, even in Denver, new organizers started cropping up in the city. People, again, were compelled to act and organize and show up. But people would go to their protest or actions thinking it was us. And they were saying things that were homophobic or transphobic or not centering Black women. And so we would get, messages on our Facebook page and our Instagram. Is this y'all? Because I thought y'all valued this. And I'm like, yeah, we're not out there.
That's not us.
And so, I think that's something that's also kind of important to kind of think about. When I say Black Lives Matter, I mean all Black lives. I mean my folks in the ICE detention. I mean my LGBTQ community. I mean all Black lives. And so, again, that's a value of ours. So, yeah, if you go to the main Black Lives Matter page, you will see like the main handful of chapters that, again, surround themselves in those guiding principles.
What do you do with the misinformation out there? Like, that's not even really a priority. Like, is it? I mean, because I feel like not many people know about everything that you just told us. Is that a goal? A daily goal? You're like, all right, this is how we're gonna, or you just focused on the mission?
We're focused on the mission. And again, it's been weird. Somebody asked me about 2 months ago, they're like, how do you feel that now everything you've been talking about for years, both in your professional career and in your work in activism, is now everybody wants to listen, or now it's trendy? So it is a little different we would have a Facebook post on our Black Lives Matter 5280 page, and we'd only have like 10 likes. Now it's thousands. And so it's just weird and strange to kind of see that momentum. But again, I welcome people because they're wanting to get educated, and we just do our thing. We've had a freedom school for the last 3 years. Freedom school is having that rich history in the civil rights movement of educating our children when the schools weren't equal. So every year we have a week-long freedom school to teach our kids historically accurate Black history, to teach them about activism as a youth. We have Black business owners come in and teach them things. So somebody comes into this Tai Chi with them to teach them, mindfulness and social emotional learning. We have a Black nutrition company, Fit and New, owned by 2 sisters. They come in and they make green smoothies with our kids and dance with our kids. So when we're focused on that, hopefully it shines through and people start learning about it.
Because that's urgent. You don't have time to waste. Because people, even if it takes a really long time, they come around, they learn, they look back at history and understand, enslaved people were freed, and then what does that mean? Where do they go? And then there's no medical support, there's no education, there's nothing. And then it's only, 100 years later that, amidst that civil rights movement leading up to it, redlining and making things basically impossible, very strategically, very systematically, to keep certain communities from being able to thrive. And we think of, I just wanted to, because you mentioned it before, the civil rights movement is celebrated. And I was taught in school, everybody, yep, like that was it. It was, and like everybody was killed. Malcolm X was killed, Martin Luther King. I mean, even RFK, who was trying, whether for political reasons or not, to advocate, and many other people. And it's crazy that we were able to grow up thinking that was like a big, it was a small victory. There were small victories, I should say, but I'm glad that, the masses are realizing that how much work there is to do. And I hope that everyone gets out and votes in every way, locally up to the top, to help us make those changes, because the public opinion is moving on this in the right direction. And I hope that keeps going.
Yeah, again, continue to know your community. Like Sly said, have you spoken to somebody who's gone to the protest? Do I always joke, do I seem like a terrorist? I'm just a college professor with a cute dog. Like,
if it was a cat, if you were petting a cat in your lap, that would be much more intimidating.
Yeah, right.
Find out about the people in your community doing this work, because you'll start seeing those myths disproven. There was one time I was at a protest downtown, and again, an article just came out last week from Time Magazine. 93% of protests have been peaceful. So a reporter interviewed me as I'm just marching, and then when I go home, my interview's at the back half. They talk about the property destruction that happened after the protest was over. The organizers of the protest said, all right, let's go home. And we all went home. And then an hour later, some people started busting windows. And that's what made the news.
Right.
And this guy drove through protesters, almost hitting hundreds of protesters. So that didn't even make the segment that night. I had friends who were almost driven through by a person who drove through protesters. But what made the news? Those broken windows.
Wow.
And so, talk to people in your community to see what's really going on. Because again, these myths are just perpetuated sometimes in the media, and it's just so unfortunate.
Thank you. Thank you again so much for your time.
Not a problem. Thank you, guys.
It was good speaking with you. Hope to see you soon.
Yep. Take care.